Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. What do you think is the creepiest / most disturbing unsolved mystery ever? The Setagaya family murder. Late on the night of December 30, 2000 in Setagaya, Tokyo, a man broke into the house of a family of 4, strangled the son in his bed, stabbed the father, and brutally killed the mother and daughter. The killer then spent hours in the house eating their food, using their toilet, and going through their paperwork like he owned the place, and eventually left, never to be found since. It's basically the modern-day Japancrimestory. It seems pretty much solvable. The police have his DNA, eyewitness descriptions, clear timeline, yet still no suspect since the killer was probably not a Japanese or was a vagrant. The Las Vegas mass shooting is the worst such event in our nation's history, and law enforcement basically told us nothing. Precisely because there's no narrative attached to it. Humans remember stuff more readily if there's story and detail built into it. The Vegas shooter did everything he could to conceal his motive, and his life was unremarkable. There also wasn't much political discourse in the aftermath, since the device he used to make his gun full auto is pretty easy to make yourself and isn't really legal anyway. It's weird how some things live in the human consciousness while seemingly objectively worse events disappear, but I think it has everything to do with how compelling the story behind the event is, and the Vegas shooting was strangely bland outside of the massive death toll. The Japancrimestory always freaked me out. I've read quite a bit about it, and it sounds like it was probably a neighbor. But the creepy part is that the killer was probably living / hiding out in the attic for multiple days beforehand. I read about this for the first time when I went on a multi-night hiking trip. I stayed in cabins. The first night, there was a loft above where we were sleeping. I stared at it all night. One creepy note that always got me was, several days before the murder, the father noticed footprints leading to the house but never found footprints leaving. Also obsessed with this one. Apparently local authorities have a pretty good idea of who did it, but they refuse to release it. 1, to spare the reputation of living descendants, and 2, because no real justice can be done at this point, and because the descendants are apparently still very powerful in that region and are ready to sue anyone who says X was a mass murderer. The Cleveland Torso Murderer. From 1935 to 1938, there was a serial killer who chopped off the heads and appendages of 12 to 20 people and left their torsos for people to find. The famous detective Elliot Ness was on the case, and the killer taunted him by leaving 2 torsos within full view of his office. The killer was never identified, nor were the majority of the victims. My grandpa wrote a book on this case. The killer will never be identified, and the victims especially. The victims seemed to be mostly homeless, prostitutes, etc. They weren't exactly traceable people. The killer was surgical. Like literally surgical in the cuts. Nobody will ever know who did it, but Elliot Ness was tortured with solving the case. Though, not as much as the victims were undoubtedly tortured, sadly. It'll remain an unsolved serial killer case. It's very interesting. Alicia Navarro. She went missing, presumably after sneaking out to meet with a man she was talking to on Discord. It's creepy because of how real it is. As a naive girl who met up with guys I befriended online as a teenager, I just cannot stop thinking about how goddamn lucky I was. Makes me think of Michaela Bali. There's no concrete proof that she was being groomed online, but in my opinion it makes more sense than she randomly deciding to run away, considering how she acted on the day she disappeared. She was also seen in CCTV calling people on her phone, but police found that it hadn't pinged to any cell towers. In my opinion, she was probably using an app that allows for voice calls instead. The Ibadan Forest of Horror in Nigeria. A local taxi driver goes missing and his friends create a makeshift search party and investigate a forest. Instead of finding their friend, they find an abandoned school, or factory, that have the remnants of a hellish torture / murder, ritual killing and human trafficking. 8 survivors were rescued. Numerous body parts, rotting corpses and personal artifacts were found. The perpetrators were never found, although local politicians and ritualists were suspects. Whilst this discovery is disturbing, the mystery for me is that the original taxi driver still hasn't been found. I am an avid Unsolved Mysteries reader, and I don't know why it has stuck with but Carly Goose. 16-year-old girl called her stepmother to pick her up from a party, reportedly was too scared to sleep because she thought someone would kill her, and the next day she disappeared. There was some weird interviews and dynamics between step-parents and birth parents, and a bunch of theories abound. Her father was just arrested for corporal injury to spouse. No further details have been released, but that's a pretty scary charge. Seems like dad has anger issues and stepmom disliked the girl. Her poor mother. The disappearance of Zeb Quinn. He was 18 years old when he went missing in 2000. Was working his shift at a local Walmart and afterwards wanted to look at a new car with a colleague, when he allegedly received a call that made him take off frantically. After that he was never seen again. The strangest thing is that a few days later his car was found in a parking lot, with the headlights turned on, a pair of lips and an exclamation mark drawn on the back window in pink lipstick, and a live Labrador puppy sitting inside. In 2017 the colleague was arrested for his murder, but all the strange details still make no sense at all. As a diver I find the disappearance of Ben McDaniels to be super interesting. They say he went into a cave and never came out, but some of the world's top cave divers looked for him and never found a body. The only evidence that he went diving were staged gas bottles, but they were filled with normal air, not any sort of mixture or anything. The owner of Vortex Springs, where Ben went missing, also died mysteriously the year after. He almost certainly drowned and had his body disposed of by local divers. It was one of the most popular dives in the country, and people didn't want his death to close it to the public, as that has happened plenty of times to other locations. In the 1970s in Galway, Ireland, local kids would spook each other out by peeking at the bones in a secret chamber in a field. Nobody really believed they were bones. Except one woman, Catherine Corliss, a local historian who, probably deducing that if the Catholic Church, who owned the land, was involved, something sketch AF was afoot. It took years, but eventually, in 2017 I think, she managed to get the site partially excavated. The bones of around 800 babies and children were been found. Who had been chucking baby bodies into this chamber? Well, Catholic nuns of course. When? The Dark Ages? No. The 1950s-ish. Maybe until the 1970s. Why? Why the F were nuns throwing baby bodies into septic tanks? Why not? The babies were born to unmarried mothers, so, those dastardly teeny babies, born to women who were basically children themselves, were full of sin. So the baby bodies, 800, remember, were put there by nuns from the nearby mother and baby's home, a place where unmarried pregnant women were sent, mostly in the 1950s, to work as slaves, receive little to no medical treatment for their pregnancies and births, and, if they were lucky, have their babies snatched from them and sold to Catholic parents in America or wherever. The less lucky babies and children died, or were killed, and thrown into a septic tank. These were their remains. God's work. And okay, this is obviously solved, right? People went to prison, amends were made, etc., right? Nope, no one has ever been charged. No one has taken any real responsibility. And the Catholic Church is currently fighting very hard to have a place in the board of a national maternity hospital being built in Ireland. And they'll get it. Because, why shouldn't we trust them? Just yesterday my colleague told me a personal account of a kidnapping of her friend. This happened when colleague and her friend were 10 years old. One day instead of going straight home, as they usually did, they went to the store to buy some candy. When they left the store some guy stopped them. He started talking to the friend all like, "Your dad sent me to take you home. I totally know you since you were a baby. Blah blah blah." Heavily paraphrased, but you get the gist of it. So the friend got convinced that he really is there to take her home, so she agreed to go with him. This guy also offered a ride to my colleague as well, but she refused, and so this guy just drove off with a friend. There was a police search and everything. 25 years has passed since then and no trace of her was ever found. Colleague thinks that he picked her friend specifically because they were athletes at the time and the school used to put their photos in the newspaper quite often. I feel like something like this almost could have happened in my hometown. There was a guy who would follow girls on their paper routes. He'd ride in his car and follow them. There wasn't anything technically illegal and he didn't focus on a single girl. I was with a friend at a baseball field, just her and me. He pulled up and while he stayed in his car the whole time, he started blowing kisses at us. We hopped on our bikes and got out of there real quick. I believe since he lived with his mother, she got him institutionalized so no one actually got harmed. Only traumatized. And she probably only got him in because another girl got kidnapped and murdered around the same time. The killer was known right away and they weren't connected, but it was close by. It was all quite scary. Honestly, the Cape intruder isn't disturbing, just weird as hell. During the night in Cape Maine in like 2005, people who kept their doors unlocked would wake up to find a man staring at them and he would quickly flee. No people were ever injured and nothing was ever stolen. They just watched people sleep apparently. Timothy Pitson. A kid who was taken from school by his mother, went to a zoo, a water park and all those fun places a kid would love, and then went missing after his mother killed herself in response to her rocky marriage. She left a suicide note saying sorry and that Timothy would be safe but never found. Pretty sad considering that the father still believes he's out there, but I'm betting he's dead. Lived close to where it happened to, but not when it initially happened. The Axeman of New Orleans. Guy was murdering people but wrote a letter that he wouldn't kill anyone who played jazz in their home. Never caught. Having lived here my whole life, and knowing this tale, it honestly never surprised me. In my head out was always, oh yeah, he just wanted the city to be the way he loves it, yeah. Nearly everybody here has done something criminal. From mischief as a kid to people willing to admit to full-on murder in a public bar because the police didn't get the nickname "Not Our Problem" dude for no reason. That, plus, people in this city hold onto a shoestring tied to tomorrow in one hand, and a chain around every day before today in the other. Tomorrow doesn't mean as much as yesterday did to them. The idea that they'll brutally murder for a memory they loved, like a city full of jazz, just isn't surprising. Not here. Dunno about other places. The murder of Lindsay Buziak, a case close to home for me that I don't see mentioned as much as it should. A relatively junior realtor in Victoria, British Columbia is showing a luxury home to some clients and the clients murdered her. The clients, a man and a woman, cold called her saying they needed to find something to buy ASAP. She was apprehensive of showing the property by herself and asked that her boyfriend come or wait outside or something. Turns out the boyfriend was running late and arrived around as the murder just occurred, but I don't believe he saw anything as the suspects fled through the back door. It's believed that she was the victim of a professional hit for some unknown reason. Also, the cell phone that was used to contact her was purchased by someone with an alias in Vancouver 6 or so months prior and was only ever used to contact her. Technically not unsolved since everyone can guess what happened to her, but it's one of the creepiest in my opinion. Alyssa Turney was a teenager who disappeared in 2001. Her stepfather, Michael Turney, was obsessed with her. He stalked her at work, put cameras in the vents to spy on her and made her sign contracts to say he never molested her. Michael picked her up from school early on May 17, 2001 and she's never been seen since. Her half-sister, Sarah Turney, has an amazing podcast called Voices for Justice which explains the case in detail, and because of her Michael Turney was arrested in August 2020. What happened to Pedro Lopez? He is one of the most prolific serial killers in history, and claims to have murdered over 350 women and girls. Since his release in 1998, his whereabouts are currently unknown. They released him? He got away several times. About 200 lives could have been saved if this one US missionary would have just minded his own effing business. He said that after being released from prison, he moved to Peru and started murdering young girls. Lopez claimed that, by 1978, he had killed over 100 girls before being caught and captured by members of an indigenous tribe. These captors were preparing to execute him, when a missionary from the US intervened and persuaded them to hand him over to state police. However, the police had quickly released him. In the early 80s, all within 18 months of each other, 3 paperboys in the Des Moines, Iowa area all went missing during their morning route. The cases have never been solved. There are theories ranging from a pedophilia ring, an ex-employee who was a creeper kidnapping them, and even a lone wolf type situation. It's a bizarre case that has baffled Iowa for years. The Spy in a Bag case, the death of MI6 operative Gareth Williams, whose decomposing corpse was found zipped into a locked duffel bag, in the bathtub on his flat. The key to the padlock was inside the bag under his body. There are many theories that he had been investigating Russian money laundering and tax fraud and paid the price. However, the police concluded that no one else was present at the time of death. There were no fingerprints or DNA found on the bathtub, including his own. It's a very strange story. Jessica Chambers. She was set on fire in her car and had gasoline poured down her throat. Paramedics found her walking down the lane on fire. The only part of her body that wasn't burned was the bottom of her feet. She did not survive. Police found a suspect but did not have enough evidence to charge him. Paramedics were so traumatized by what they saw, they had to go through therapy, and broke down on stage during interviews. She tried to name her attacker, but her throat was so destroyed, she couldn't be understood. The disappearance of the Beaumont children. The Beaumont children are siblings who disappeared in 1966. There are still to this day investigations ongoing to try and find the remains of these children. There have been foundations of sheds and houses dug up. The children have never been found and the suspects has never been identified. I know it was a different time, but letting a 4-year-old take a bus to a beach under the supervision of a 9-year-old is insane. What if they just literally drowned? It was, indeed, an entirely different time. People didn't think anything of their children being out in public unsupervised in the US in the 1960s. We ranged good distances from home with no one worrying. My grandpa told me that when he was 9 he took the train from his village to the 30 kilometers away city and spent all his money on a fare. When he didn't have enough money to take the train back he walked the 30 kilometers which took him 2 days. While he was resting 2 men gave him their jackets so he wouldn't be cold. When he came back his parents didn't even notice that he was gone for so long. Weird thing about it is that the crime rates were much higher back then. Today, still with lower violent crime rates, people are much more paranoid about everything. 24/7 news cycles, endlessly repeating crimes, have conditioned people. I'll preface by saying it's the creepiest one locally. There was a number of girls in their 20s that went missing around the Leinster area of Ireland. That's the area that includes Dublin, Meath, Kildare, Wicklow on the east of the country that visitors may know. In the 1990s, no bodies were ever found. There was one guy arrested after kidnapping a girl, after raping and beating her multiple times, when she was heard crying/screaming by 2 men out hunting and they rescued her. He was recognized by the men who brought her to the local Garda station, police, and they identified the kidnapper/rapist to them. He was arrested the next day at his home and sentenced to 15 years but served only 10 due to the fucked up Irish criminal system where most serve 2/3 of their sentence. The most disturbing part is when the girl was rescued, she said he'd do to me what he did to the rest of them. Larry Murphy was convicted of the rape, kidnapping, and attempted murder of that girl and fled Ireland after his release from jail. What he did to the rest of them is the chilling part. Is he responsible for the other missing girls? Maybe, probably yeah. I don't know about creepy, but disturbing, yeah. The Delphi murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. 2 teenage girls hiking on a trail in Delphi, Indiana. Walking across a bridge, one of them spots a creepy guy following them on the bridge and even films it. There's audio recording of suspected bridge guy ordering them to go down the hill. They were murdered and found not far from the bridge they were on. That was years ago, and the murder is nowhere closer to being solved. Even with video of the suspect, the bridge guy. There's been new developments in the last year or 2 where people thought it might be some guy, but he got ruled out. Now it's a father/son suspect situation right now, and people seem to be holding out hope it's them. I personally don't think it is. But in any case, it's been years now, doesn't look to be solved anytime soon. Very sad situation. The Mr. Cruel case, it's absolutely terrifying and disgusting. What's this? I don't know if I want it in my search history or not. Australian case of a man who wore a terrifying mask, kidnapped and sexually assaulted 3 young girls before leaving them alive to be found, then assaulting and killing a 4th girl. He preyed on young girls and eventually killed one. A monster. Jack the Ripper. There's a few victims compared to others' cases, however the way it was done is horrible. It's a mystery unsolved since 1888 and that will never be. When you know that during that times, London smelled, was hidden by a thick fog, everything was dirty and the people all struggled despite the industrial boom. Imagine when you are from the lower class ever, knowing a serial killer is outside and you literally have nothing to protect you. The policemen were useless. It happened quick, and the killer disappeared. It put London in terror. This case much reminds me of the Yorkshire Ripper case nearly 100 years later. Peter Sutcliffe was going around killing women from the 1970s, and the police were useless without modern technology. No one really suspected him and he nearly got away with it, until he was caught by pure coincidence and accident. There was even tape recordings sent to the investigators, by a hoax, just like there were letters sent in the Ripper case. I think the identity of the Ripper has to be much the same, someone overlooked, likely even a family man. Unfortunately it's too late to ever know. Amy Lynn Bradley, especially if the sex trafficking theory is true. So I read this and other stories of women disappearing on cruise ships not long before I went on my 10th cruise. The second to last night, we open a bottle of champagne in our room, we leave for 10 minutes to visit a friend's cabin about 2 doors down while staff services our room. We come back to the room and I have a single glass of champagne. I have a very high tolerance for alcohol and have never, not once become drunk after just 1 glass of anything, ever. After drinking 1 glass, we head to dinner. While at dinner, I start to feel woozy, queasy, and a little dizzy. I get up and excuse myself to head to the restroom when I suddenly remembered that all of the missing girls' friends and family stated they said they felt like I did and either left to go to the bathroom or to their rooms alone. I asked my husband to please accompany me as I was scared. He did, but he decided to use the restroom as well, and when I came out, I was alone and leaned up against the side of the wall waiting for him. 3 male cruise employees had been hanging around the restrooms and immediately tried to get me to let them help me back to my room. I repeatedly said I was fine where I was and I thanked them. One man actually grabbed my arm and said he would take me back to my room and tried to forcibly move me. I was wobbly and wearing heels, so I just sat down, looked up at him, and yelled no. My husband heard me yell and came running out of the restroom asking them what in the hell they were doing. The men changed from predators to pretending they were trying to help me. My husband took me back to our room where I apparently told him the entire story, which I don't remember because I have no memory, for about 8 hours. I have been roofied before, and I believe I was roofied on the ship when a member of staff spiked the champagne in our room. My husband doesn't drink anymore, so he didn't have any. We reported the incident, but to my knowledge nothing came of it. I don't share this story very often, but I believe I was targeted, and if I hadn't been awake enough to yell no and had my husband not been with me, I would have ended up trafficked or dead. Unsurprisingly, this experience soured me on cruises.